Chapter 5. The letters begin. The study had grown darker. Elias noticed this now, the way the afternoon light had begun to retreat from the corners of the room, leaving behind a grey stillness that seemed to settle on everything like dust. He had been sitting at his desk for 3 hours, and in that time the sun had moved across the sky, and the shadows had lengthened, and the world had continued its indifferent rotation. He had not noticed. He had been writing. The letter to Clara had been sent. He had received her reply. She was willing to try. The words repeated in his mind like a prayer, like a charm, like something he needed to believe in order to keep breathing. She was willing to try. But what did that mean? What did it mean to be willing to try? It meant nothing, and it meant everything. It meant that she had not slammed the door. It meant that she had left it open, just a crack, just enough for a sliver of light to enter. It meant that he had a chance, however slim, however fragile, to make things right. And so, he had begun to write. Not the letter he had written before, not the raw, desperate plea that had gone out into the void. Something different. Something more deliberate. Something that would explain everything. He had decided to write her a series of letters. A collection. A testament. A record of his life's work, laid out in careful, measured prose. Each argument building on the last. Each conclusion flowing logically from the premises. He would show her the path he had walked. He would show her the logic that had led him to his conclusions. He would show her that he was not a monster, not a sociopath, not a man who had never allowed himself to feel a single genuine emotion. He would show her that he had been trying, in his own flawed and imperfect way, to save the world. The first letter had taken him 3 days to write. He had drafted it, revised it, deleted it, started again. He had agonized over every word. He had weighed every sentence. He had tried to find the right balance between the personal and the philosophical, the emotional and the logical. He had failed. He knew he had failed. The letter was too cold, too clinical, too much like a lecture, and not enough like a confession. But it was the best he could do. It was the best he had ever done. He read it now, sitting in the grey afternoon light, his fingers resting on the keyboard. Dear Clara, the letter began. I'm writing to you because I want you to understand. I want you to understand why I have made the choices I have made, why I have lived the life I have lived, why I have never had children, why I have never married, why I have pushed away everyone who has ever tried to love me. He paused. He read the words again. They were true. They were honest. They were the most honest words he had written in years. But they were also inadequate. They were inadequate to the task. They were inadequate to the burden of explaining a lifetime of choices, a lifetime of convictions, a lifetime of loneliness. He continued reading. I know you think I'm a monster, a sociopath, a man who has never allowed himself to feel a single genuine emotion. And you are right. You are right in a way. I have not allowed myself to feel, to love, to be vulnerable. I have spent my entire life building walls, and I have spent my entire life hiding behind them. He stopped. The words were too raw, too naked, too much like the truth he had spent his life avoiding. But he had written them. He had written them, and he could not take them back. But I want you to understand why. I want you to understand that the walls were not built out of cruelty. They were built out of fear, fear of suffering, fear of loss, fear of the pain that inevitably accompanies love. I have spent my entire life trying to prevent suffering, to protect the unborn from the pain of existence, building arguments, constructing philosophies, writing books that would convince people to turn away from the gamble of procreation. And I have succeeded. I have succeeded in ways I never imagined. I have changed minds. I have convinced people. I have saved lives. in my own way. He read the words. They were true, honest. They were the words of a man who had spent his life trying to do good. And yet, I have failed. I have failed because I have forgotten the most important thing. I have forgotten that philosophy is not a substitute for life, that arguments are not a substitute for love, that the purpose of existence is not to avoid suffering, but to find meaning in it. He stopped. The words were too much, too honest, too raw. He could not send this letter because it would destroy everything he had built. It would destroy the arguments, the philosophy, the life's work that had given him meaning. But he had written it. He had written it, and he could not take it back. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was the most difficult thing he had ever done. He read the letter again, from beginning to end, carefully, deliberately, weighing each word. It was not a good letter, not a well-crafted letter, not the letter he had intended to write. It was messy. It was raw. It was full of contradictions and uncertainties and doubts. But it was honest. The days passed. He did not hear from Clara. He did not expect to. She was a busy woman, a woman with a life, a woman with children. She did not have time to process the confessions of a man who had spent his life pushing her away. He wrote her another letter. Then another. Then another. He wrote about his childhood, about his mother, his grandmother, about the sparrow, about the arguments, the philosophy, the life's work that had consumed him. He wrote about the loneliness, the crushing, consuming loneliness that had been his constant companion, the loneliness that had driven him to build walls, to construct arguments, to push away everyone who had ever tried to love him. He wrote about the loneliness, and he wrote about the fear, and he wrote about the certainty of death. He wrote it all down. He put it all into words, and he sent it all to his sister.